Okay, so good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to welcome Chancellor Merkel to New Zealand. It's a great privilege to have you here. This is the first visit to our country by a German Chancellor since 1997, so it's a tremendous occasion and one that New Zealanders welcome. We've just returned from a great Kiwi experience. The Chancellor accompanied me to Motatapu Island to hear about the Department of Conservation's Kiwi Recovery Program and to release Kiwi into its new habitat. It's great the Chancellor has been able to include New Zealand in her busy program, and I trust the Kiwi experience has been a memorable one for her. As you know, we're in the midst of an intense international schedule. The Chancellor and I will both be attending the G20 tomorrow in Brisbane. I've just returned this morning from the East Asian Summit in Myanmar and APEC in Beijing. I'd like to acknowledge that Germany has just marked the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the momentous events that led to Germany's reunification. As a close friend of Germany, we followed those inspiring events a quarter of a century ago and the subsequent huge effort that went into building one united country in the tremendous speech that the Chancellor made a few days ago. New Zealand and Germany have a very strong relationship together. Trade and investment links are extremely robust. Two-way trade with Germany is now bigger than two-way trade with the United Kingdom, and Germany is a very large investor in New Zealand. There's scope for a lot more business engagement building on this, and I talked with the Chancellor today about our aspirations for a free trade agreement with the EU. There are close connections between our people with large numbers of tourists moving in each direction, exchanges of students and working holiday makers. There's also strength in our science and innovation links. Chancellor Merkel will shortly be delivering a speech at Auckland University, reflecting on those links and on German science and innovation developments. There is more we can do to strengthen bilateral links. We have agreed to have more regular discussions of international issues. I want to expand the number of German opinion leaders who know New Zealand, so I'm announcing a new Prime Minister's Fellowship Program for Germany that will enable us to bring an up-and-coming German Member of Parliament or leader to New Zealand for a familiarisation visit each year. In terms of other issues, we had a lot to discuss in terms of major international developments, including ISIL, Syria, Russia, Ukraine, and our respective relationships with China. We are releasing a joint statement today which summarises our discussion and notes the many areas of agreement between us. But Chancellor, once again, it's a great privilege to welcome you here to New Zealand. You're amongst friends, and thank you very much for taking the time to visit our country.
Ja, meine Damen und Herren, ich möchte mich bedanken bei dem Premierminister John Key, dass ich so freundschaftlich hier empfangen wurde. Er hat mich nach Neuseeland eingeladen und ich bin gerne dieser Einladung gefolgt. Im Vortreffen jetzt zu dem G20-Treffen, auf dem wir uns dann ja wieder begegnen werden, wie wir uns auf den verschiedenen internationalen Konferenzen auch immer wieder begegnet sind. Ich bin beeindruckt von der Schönheit des Landes, natürlich, von der ich einen ganz kleinen Einblick bekommen konnte, jetzt auf der Insel, auf der ich auch ein Kiwi aussetzen durfte oder fast bis an den Rand seines eigenen Loches, wo dieser Vogel dann leben wird, und das war ein sehr bewegender Moment. Ich begrüße das. Verletzungen der territorialen Integrität der Ukraine haben, dass das Minsker Abkommen leider nicht eingehalten wird, dass wir besorgniserregende Entwicklungen haben, was auch Waffenlieferungen anbelangt. Das beunruhigt mich mehr und das wird auch Gegenstand natürlich der Gespräche am Rande des G20-Gipfels sein. Ich will aber bei der Gelegenheit noch einmal danken, dass auch Neuseeland sich den Sanktionen gegen Russland angeschlossen hat, die wir ja nicht als Selbstzweck einführen, sondern die wir durchgeführt haben, weil wir einfach die Notwendigkeit solcher Sanktionen sehen, um auf die Verletzung der territorialen Integrität in Europa zu reagieren.
Let me start in reverse order. The Kiwi, I understand, was the 19th Kiwi to be released on Motatapu Island. So it will be the most famous, given it was given its pathway to freedom by the Chancellor. But as you know, we are working very hard on a program to ensure that the kiwi is not an extinct bird, and that island has only been pest-free now for 3 years. So a lot of work going in terms of the program and in collaboration with the private sector. In terms of the Russian ships that are going towards APEC, well, they are, I guess, technically in international waters, so they're free to do what they like. Whether that's necessarily helpful is another matter. But what we did discuss at lunch really is the wider issues of Russia and ultimately the situation in Ukraine. We obviously in New Zealand are a long way away from that situation, but we do have deep concerns about the instability that's causing and the impact it's having on growth, particularly in Europe. And of course we, like the rest of the world, look to Europe to be a strong growing partner to underpin global growth. So concerns in the Ukraine and the wider region are obviously concerns to New Zealand.
Thank you.
Naja, wir haben sehr schnell reagiert und in Übereinstimmung mit der irakischen Regierung Waffen an Peschmerga, also an die kurdischen Regionaltruppen, geliefert, haben in diesem Zusammenhang die Kurden auch ausgebildet, und das ist unser Beitrag im Augenblick, und wir denken darüber nach, ob es notwendig sein könnte, weitere Ausbildungsaufgaben zu übernehmen. Dabei ist uns sehr wichtig, dass politisch die irakische Regierung inklusiv geführt wird. Der neue Premierminister Al-Albadi hat hierzu wichtige erste Schritte unternommen, auch die Sunniten besser mit einzubeziehen.
Just talking to the Chancellor, it's pretty obvious that New Zealand and Germany are taking a very, very similar approach to the situation in Iraq, as we did actually in Afghanistan. And I think all of us understand that ultimately, for there to be success in Iraq, it really requires a diplomatic solution, which includes an inclusive government. And I can tell you from being at both East Asian Summit and at APEC, I think the view of leaders that attended those summits was very much focused on that the responsibility for ultimately delivering a successful outcome rests with the Al-Albadi government and their ability to find inclusion both for the Sunnis and the Kurds into what is a Shiite government. So I believe the steps that we announced last week at looking at training and providing support through that is the right mechanism, and like the Chancellor, we don't believe that combat troops are the right way forward.
Thank you. Next question from Gerald.
Über unsere genauen Zeitpläne werden wir Sie dann noch rechtzeitig informieren, aber es gibt durchaus die Chance, dass es zu einem Treffen kommt. Wenn ich von meiner Seite aus sagen darf, was erwarte ich von G20? Ich erwarte, dass wir sehr gut vorbereitet durch die australischen Gastgeber dort ein klares Signal Richtung Entwicklung der Weltwirtschaft senden, dass wir ein klares Signal auch für Wachstum natürlich senden.
Well, I think the real challenge for the G20 really is ultimately to say, now that we have stabilised the global economy post the global financial crisis, how do we move to the next step of sustained and global growth? And I think it's clear that there are a number of features which would allow that to take place. Free trade is clearly one of them, and that is why TPP is top of the agenda for President Obama. It's also why the Chinese at APEC were very focused on the extension of FTAC, which is a free trade agreement between the 21 countries and economies of APEC. So that's the first thing. I think the second is ultimately how the global economy will actually cope with the situation post-quantitative easing in the United States and in other countries in the world. We're seeing very large increase in monetary supply in countries like Japan and the United States, but actually the world is going to have to learn to live with a post-environment as quantitative easing ends. And so the real challenge for all of us is to grow using innovation, technology, science transfer. And I think the final point really is to identify where the risks are, and the risks are fairly clear in terms of both the Middle East. If there was to be a deterioration of the position from ISIS, then that I think presents a real global threat, and of course, ultimately a worsening position in Russia. or Ukraine could ultimately lead to a further slowdown in Europe. We're already seeing some reduction in growth there, and given the size of the European economy, we all need Europe to be a powerful growing economy again, and that is the challenge for the G20, to look to the growth pathway for the next 12 to 24 months.
Ich weiß, dass Neuseeland zu den sogenannten Five Eyes gehört, eine sehr enge nachrichtendienstliche Zusammenarbeit mit den Vereinigten Staaten von Amerika hat. Deutschland hat auch eine sehr enge Zusammenarbeit mit den Nachrichtendiensten der Vereinigten Staaten von Amerika. Wir sind darauf im Übrigen auch angewiesen, wenn es um Cyberattacken geht, wenn es um Gefährdungen der inneren Sicherheit anbelangt. Es hat schon eine Reihe von terroristischen Anschlägen gegeben, die in Deutschland verhindert werden konnten durch die Zusammenarbeit.
Well, New Zealand, like all countries, has an intelligence agency, and has those agencies for very good reasons. For the most part, for the protection of property and the interests of New Zealand and New Zealanders. In terms of Germany, actually, while it's true we are part of Five Eyes and Germany is not, we actually have intelligence that we share with the Germans and vice versa, because we share all sorts of environments where it's in our interest to do so. I think there are some lessons that have been learned in the past, but if I was the Chancellor, I would rest assured she has nothing to fear on her phone calls in New Zealand. She's a great friend of New Zealand. If we have any questions of her, I'll just simply ask her. I think that would be the fastest way of resolving that issue. So, she's nothing to fear.
Thank you very much.